Greetings, all of my friends. It's Carlton Flowers here with the Go Political channel, and I want to wish you all a very happy Father's Day today on Sunday. And I hope you're having a good time, spending quality time with your family, with your fathers, and also a prayer for those of you who are missing your fathers like I am. My father passed away 3 years ago, but I'm so grateful and thankful for having such a role model and a great person in the father that I had. So, announcement. This is a new format, the podcast format, and this is something that I am going to start doing so I can keep up with you and talk about current events, to chop it up in the comments and not have to do any editing. So one thing is, it takes a long time, a lot of time, research, planning. Editing is crazy when I do these big club banger videos, exposés, and cover topics that I have a lot of graphics and notes. But with a podcast, we can just talk. This is more of a talk show format, and we can talk about current events and issues, and I can get this uploaded so much easier and stay in touch better with you. So it's something that I could envision doing every day, where I'm including a daily podcast in addition to all of the videos and weekly live streams that I want to do. So this is kind of something that will fill in the gaps. And so I can't wait to hear your feedback on whether or not you appreciate and want more of the podcast format. Now, right out the bat, I know that it will mainly be the people who are really close with me, the close followers of the Go Political channel who are always there in the comments, the members. This is especially for you members. I want to be able to provide you with more great content that you can think about, consider, so we can discuss the issues as they happen on a daily basis. So this is really for you, the members. You know who you are, who are always there for me. And I'm really excited to do this because I can cover so much content, and then I don't have to say, wait to do a bunch of editing if we have a breaking news event that happens today and something that we need to talk about. I don't have to worry about rushing and dropping everything I'm doing so that I can be a news breaking type of person, as I don't have time for that. But with a podcast, I can break news and we can discuss things as they happen, more in real time. So that's what is up. And I tell you what, I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I even have several topics written down on this envelope. And so one good thing is you can listen to this in your earbuds, in your headphones, while you're working, while you're relaxing. You don't have to worry about staring at the screen. Any chance that you get to decrease that screen time? Well, that's a good thing. So let's run through a few topics and then we'll wrap it on up, and then you can give me feedback on how you would like to have more of a podcast format to fill in the gaps, and if you think that this is a good idea. So the first thing that I notice is all over the news is the situation down in Cuba. So there are 4 Russian warships that are down off the coast of Cuba, and this is an interesting thing. For the most part, I'm not seriously rattled by that. I'm not totally thinking that we're about to jump into World War III. But there are a few things that I have an opinion about. Now, first off, I don't think that the Russians are planning on an attack. They have been in cahoots with Russia or with Cuba for a long time. And although this is a normal practice, it's just kind of a little bit stepped up. And it's the timing of it that is interesting. And I think the Russians, Vladimir Putin, is basically sending a message. I think he's sending a message. And why? I think that message is being sent because the United States is basically fighting a proxy war. So let's think about this. We have spent, what, $200 billion or more in the last, couple of years since the invasion, since Russia invaded the Ukraine. And we know that it's a real sketchy situation because the eastern part of Ukraine is filled with Russian citizens, or not citizens, Russian language speaking people that have the same roots, who supposedly, as the story goes, they were being mistreated by the country and not getting the same attention, protections that the rest of the Ukrainian citizens were enjoying. And so then Russia, who feels like they're a part of their culture, they want to invade and take that country back. And so there's a lot that comes behind that. First of all, we had the promises that were given by the UN that we would never try to annex another country and add to the NATO regime, right? And so then Russia said, okay, you keep your hands off the Ukraine, but the United States starts pushing in and talking about wanting to add Ukraine into NATO. And so, of course, Russia takes that as a threat because they're thinking, okay, they want to encroach upon our area and jump in and add a country that borders Russia and add that into NATO. So that's a big threat to them. So they invade. And then we support Ukraine with the printing of billions of dollars. Okay? So let's think about this. The Ukrainians are supposedly the ones fighting the war, but we're dumping all the money into it. And if you don't think that there are Americans over there fighting behind the scenes, think again. There are people from Europe and United States citizens who are there that are supporting this thing. And like I said, we're printing billions of dollars at taxpayer expenses so we can send all of the bombs and munitions to the Ukraine to help them fight against Russia. Now, in my opinion, Ukraine is not one of the greatest nations in the world that we want to support, or that you would think we would support. They've got a reputation for being one of the most corrupt nations in the world. Racial tensions are really high, and this country has a reputation for serious mistreatment of Africans, people of color that live there. Have a really hard time. So here we have this corrupt regime, but since it's bordering Russia, I guess President Biden feels like, okay, we need to support this country in its fight against Russia. Now, in my opinion, it's none of our business. They're not a part of NATO and they should not be. And adding Ukraine would definitely go against the peace treaty that was made, where the United States and NATO had said, okay, we'll stick to our business. We will not expand. We won't try to convert any more countries, and Russia will not expand and try to add any more into the Eastern Bloc. And so with us supporting the Ukraine, that basically is kind of going against that promise, and it threatens the Russians. Now, some people say that the Russians are going to go all the way through and just conquer all of Europe. I'll tell you what, I don't believe that. I don't believe it. I think that they have specific reasons, and it's for those Russian-speaking people in the eastern part that they've cut off their water supply. They've done all kind of crazy things, and so then the Russians feel like they need to go in and protect their people. So to me, hey, stay out of it. We can't start proxy wars all over the world and think that we're not going to have any consequences. So we've got all these problems and situations here in our own country, but we're going to print billions upon billions of dollars to support Ukraine fighting a war against the Russians, which means really, for all intents and purposes, we are in a war with Russia. I mean, let's look at it from the standpoint of Vladimir Putin. Okay, so he invades the Ukraine, and then we send over $200 billion worth of munitions. Well, that means that it's the United States fighting the Russians in a war, all right? And so sending these ships down to Cuba is kind of sending a message to say, well, let's see how you like it. Let's see how nervous it makes you, United States, when we send warships off of your coast to Cuba, who's in alliance with us, and just see how you feel that, if this would make you nervous or not, or, if we step up our measures in having a presence down in Cuba, how would that make you feel? Now, what if we were in a war with Cuba and Russia was spending billions of dollars to support them, well, that would mean that we're in a war with Russia. And we wouldn't appreciate that any more than the Russians appreciate us spending $200 billion of our taxpayer money to send over the bombs and munitions that has wiped out, what, half of their army? I mean, it's very effective. The Ukraine war, it's not going to end well. They're not going to win. And so this is a work in futility. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars for what? For the Russians to eventually annex the Ukraine and take it back as an Eastern Bloc country. So what are we going to have to show for it? And I guess we'll have to find out. We'll have to wait and see if Russia sweeps through and takes all of Europe, which, again, I don't see that happening. Now, one thing that happened a year or two ago, we had that whole Nord Stream pipeline mess. So someone blows up the Nord Stream pipeline that supplies natural gas to all of Europe. And of course, we blamed it on the Russians. And the Russians are like, what are you talking about? We didn't do this. And then come to find out, it was the United States behind blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. Okay, now that's a topic for a whole nother video. And there's reasons why the CIA, who I think was involved in that action, had done that. And it was kind of like gaslighting, pun intended, to blow up that gas line and blame the Russians. Okay, so there's been a lot of conspiratorial stuff that's been going on. But here's the kicker. We print $200 billion. And who's paying for that? Well, it's the taxpayers. Now, how do we pay for it? We're not directly paying for it. But when you flood the economy with all this newly printed money, right? The value of the dollar goes down because there's a lot more dollars in circulation. So when you spend $200 billion on munitions, you send all of that money to the big defense contractors, they're making money, the employees are getting paid, and then those dollars are flooded into our economy, okay? And when we flood those dollars into the economy, the value of the dollar goes down because it's the dilution effect, and then we see prices go up on everything. That is why you're going to the grocery store and you're paying twice for a dozen of eggs or for your butter or for your milk. It's because we have so much more money being flooded into the system. So we don't have a choice in the matter. President Biden gets to decide on the Federal Reserve printing money that didn't exist before to pay for the bombs and munitions, and then we get bit in the butt with the impending inflation. Okay, so for that reason, I've never been for the Russian invasion. Nobody wants to see a country get invaded, but I'm also not for the United States supporting the Ukrainians. They don't deserve it because they're a corrupt country. They don't deserve it because they're not a part of NATO. And then what is the long-term end result of the United States meddling into all of these foreign affairs and spending money to fund proxy wars? It's not going to lead to anything good because, like I said before, the Ukrainians are not going to win this war. And once it's all said and done, we're the ones that end up with a ton more money flooded into the U.S. economy. The defense contractors get rich, and then us, the working class people, end up paying a whole lot more for gas, groceries, and living expenses. So I think that's a big mess, and that's something that kind of takes me to my next topic, which is, what are you looking for in your president? What's going to help you make your determination for things that are affecting you in your daily lives? One thing I want to see is an end to funding the proxy war, where the Federal Reserve can stop printing hundreds of billions of dollars. Biden just authorized another $50 billion for this war in Ukraine. And it's not just the Democrats, okay? There are Republicans who are behind this too. All too often, we divide ourselves along political lines, the Republicans versus the Democrats. And believe you me, there are people who get triggered and unsubscribe to my channel anytime I say something critical of the Democrats. I do criticize the Democrats more than I do Republicans, but it's only because of the topics that we are covering. But that doesn't mean that there isn't corruption in both parties. Now, behind this two-party political system is another two-party system that you guys don't talk about much. And that is the deep state, or those that are involved with the CIA from both sides of the fence in starting all these proxy wars all over the world, and those who are against the CIA and the deep state. And so rather than dividing yourselves from Republican to Democrat, I think you need to look at the corruption of what's going on behind the scenes with the deep state. Now, I know some of y'all will just write that off and say, oh, that's just conspiracy theory, Carlton. There's no deep state. And I'm going to do videos and I'm going to talk about the deep state and provide you with evidence. And we can either call it the deep state or we can just call it things that happen that seem to be irrefutable, where there is collaboration, corroboration that's going on with certain entities that don't involve the population of the working people of the United States. And there are decisions that are made that seem to be outside of the power of those who we think, the politicians that are in control. So back to the point that I was trying to make. This election to me is about putting someone into office that can fight for the things that affect my daily life. Like, I am against the printing of an endless amount of money to support proxy wars, because we're paying for it at the gas pump and in the grocery store. If you're going to print money, I want to see you print money solving issues that we have right here in the United States. Like, let's say, veterans benefits, the homeless situation, education, helping the poor in the inner cities and in rural areas across America. Okay, for the amount of money that we have printed to blow things up just for destruction's sake for this proxy war, we could probably solve the homeless situation. All right. And so I am against the printing of an endless amount of money to support a war. And like I said, there's Republicans behind it and there are Democrats behind it. I'm against those who are feeding the war machine. What's the lady who was running for president against Trump? The governor of, Virginia? You know who I'm talking about. I can't think of it just because I'm thinking of her. But this lady, she has either Native American or Indian background. And she is part of the war machine. And so she's a Republican, right? Card-carrying Republican, but she's part of this same warmongering contingency that wants to fund these endless wars around the globe. I'm against that. I'm against Biden spending an endless amount of money for these wars. Now, there are two candidates that are against that, all right? And my vote is going to be for one of those two candidates that's not going to continue to support this war situation. So I want to vote for a person that can say, all right, if we're going to print endless amounts of money, let's print it for ourselves and solve our own situations. I also want to vote for a candidate that can solve this ridiculous situation with immigration. That's going to be a topic for another podcast where I'll focus on that alone. We have had more illegal immigrants flood into this country in the last several years than the population of 28 of our states. And that doesn't make any sense. And here's the thing about it. We deport people who have tried for 8 years, 10 years, 12 years and more, and have spent tens of thousands of dollars on attorney's fees trying to become naturalized, right? And they end up getting deported. We still deport people, but then we've relaxed the rules and we have all these people that come flooding in through various ports of entry where we let them claim political asylum and then they get bussed all over the country. And then we spend taxpayer money helping them to get the food that they want to eat, helping them to get lodging. And then we even relax laws as they commit crimes. We don't deport them. We treat them completely differently than how we treat the citizens or people who are trying to come to this country using the legal means and abiding by the rules. Okay? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm looking for someone who can completely stand behind abiding by the rules and setting a framework for immigration where it is fair across the board, and not where we're giving millions of people the ability to come on in, undocumented or not, where you're breaking the rules, cutting the lines, where these folks who decide, okay, I'm not going to abide by the rules, well, when you say forget the rules, you get free food, free lodging, and we're even giving them the ability to vote in certain local jurisdictions, and plans are being made right now so that these millions of people can vote in federal elections. It doesn't make any sense. Look at Chicago, for instance. You can be an undocumented or illegal immigrant and you can hold jobs, even within the police department. You can become a police officer and be an illegal immigrant, while other people who are trying to do it the legal way are being deported. And I told this story in one of my videos about a friend of mine, Manuel, who was here for at least 10 years, had 2 restaurants, had employees, was a tax-paying citizen in Jefferson City, whose kids were growing up with my kids, going to the same school, and he ended up getting deported 4 years ago. He got deported because his time ran out. So then why are we deporting Manny, who is a tax-paying citizen, abiding by the rules, employing people and doing productive things? Why are we deporting him, but we're allowing 5 million others to come in breaking the rules? It doesn't make any sense. So that is something that is important to me in this election. And it is not something that's going to be solved by just the political division that we currently see. It's not a Republican versus Democrat thing. You're fooled if you think that's the case, because there are Republicans and Democrats who are part of this problem of allowing people to break the rules. But there are 2 of the 3 candidates that are against allowing this situation to continue, and the problems that it's creating, and the fact that we, the taxpayers, are the ones that have to foot the bill. Now, if you look at the situation in the south side of Chicago, you've seen Chicago pass bill after bill. The last one where they passed a bill to spend another $90 million for illegal immigrants, right? To pay for their housing, to give them food, to help them to get jobs, while the black community in the south side of Chicago suffers and has to give up their resources. We're talking parks, we're talking boys and girls clubs, old schools, hotels, things that are a staple for the black community, but then we have to let those things go because they want to hand that over because the corrupt mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, wants to spend all of their money on these illegal immigrants, just based on the promise from the federal government that they'll pay, I think it's something like $15,000 for every illegal immigrant that they allow them to bus into the city of Chicago. And I don't think the feds are going to keep that promise and even give them that money. So that's something that's big for me. I'm looking for a president that can solve the situations that affect my life the most, because I'm finding myself working harder, working more hours every day just to keep the same standard of living and trying to get out of debt. Just trying to get out of debt. So that's huge for me. I'd love to know what things you think are most pressing. And if you're like me, do you feel yourself working harder to keep up the same standard of living? Let me know in the comments. Let's talk about that. I want to hear more about it. Now, in the next podcast, I've got some topics that I want to talk about, which concerns voter fraud and an easy solution that could completely obsolete the whole situation of cheating in elections. But for some strange reason, we don't want to implement this solution. We want to continue on with these machines and methods that allow for cheating. So I'm going to bring that up, as I think it's a great topic of discussion. And then we're going to talk about how the accusations of voter fraud and Russian collusion have flipped in the last 8 years, where it seems like, okay, one party says the other party is colluding with the Russians and is throwing an election. And then we flip it where the other party accuses this one of colluding with the Russians and cheating on an election. You can't have both. It's too convenient that the losing party can automatically, conveniently blame the Russians and cheating, okay? But I don't think that the Russians are controlling all of our elections. And you can't have your cake and eat it too. We can't have the Republicans blaming the Democrats for colluding with the Russians and then turn around and the Democrats claim it's the the Republicans that are colluding with the Russians. It doesn't make any sense. I think we're all getting played by that situation. So we're going to discuss that. And then we're also going to talk about Robert F. Kennedy and some interesting things that are going on as he has departed from the Democratic Party and he's running as an independent. Okay, so I am going to be getting back to the comments on the previous video that I did covering the situation in Dalton. I did the video about moral turpitude, and man, it's gotten a great response. It's approaching 15,000 views, and I've got about 250 comments that I have to get back to. So I'm going to hit the like button on all the comments that I like, and then I'm going to try to answer as many as I can. And then what would you think of me doing podcasts where I answer the questions in the comments instead of typing? Because it takes a long time to answer all of those comments. And I'm getting to that point where it's going to be impossible for me to answer everyone in the comments. So maybe I can do that with a podcast. Would you give me feedback and let me know if you think that is a great use of a daily podcast where I can interact with you and answer questions? Would you listen to the podcast if it meant that I might be answering your comment on my videos? I want you to let me know. Okay, so I don't know how long I've even been talking in this first inaugural podcast, but I'm going to end it right here and just say thank you for listening in. And I want you to like and comment and subscribe to the channel. And please consider helping support me with the giving of a super thanks. And I will go live soon so I can raise the money that I need to do this as a job. The more income that I make from YouTube, the more I'll be able to spend time with you and cut back on some of my 5 different hats that I wear. I have 5 businesses and I work from the time I get up in the morning till 1 and 2 a.m. at night. Okay, I've got 4 kids, 2 grandkids, nieces and nephews that I help to support. And I take care of my aging mother who's 87 years old. So I have a lot on my plate. And I'd like to do this is something that I want as a career. So I appreciate all of you who have supported me, and please, if you would become a member, that will help to at least defray some of the cost of producing the channel. So I appreciate that. All right, well, that's all I've got for this one. Thank you so much for listening. This is Carlton Flowers, and I am out. Peace.